listening to The Foundation of Wellness, a refreshing take on diet and lifestyle. Join me, Marisa Moon, as we tackle modern health with innovative and ancient principles. I'm a certified primal health coach and intermittent fasting instructor at marisamoon.com. Hey you guys, it's me, Marisa. Thanks for being here on The Foundation of Wellness. I brought a guest on the show today who's going to talk to us about all of the stress eating and just disordered eating we've been experiencing since we are home all the time. I mean, at the time of this recording, it was June 2nd, 2020, and lots of places in the U.S. are still on lockdown, and there's just a ton of stressful things going on in the world that we cannot ignore, including social justice issues, and it just is heartbreaking. It's so hard to even get on with the day and really have much purpose, especially if you're not working. And it can be so hard that we turn to food to comfort us, and we may regress to old behaviors that we've finally freed ourselves from before this pandemic. And so I thought it'd be perfect to have someone like Melainie on the show because she specializes in eating disorders, and she is really teaching us there's a lot more to it than we thought, because even if you never get diagnosed with an eating disorder and never even imagine that you might have disordered eating, apparently that's because it's just normalized in our society now. We're all obsessed with dieting, obsessed with rules. So those are some of the things that we talk about in this interview. And Melainie is actually like so cool to talk to. She's just so understanding and open and realistic, and she totally gets it. And that's what we need when we're talking about diet, when we're being hard on ourselves, when we're binge eating, when we're snacking secretly, and we're just hiding this relationship that we have with food and with stress, and we don't have a lot of coping mechanisms besides turning to food or things like alcohol that give us an escape. And that's why I brought Melainie Rogers on the show. She's a certified eating disorder registered dietitian and supervisor. She is dedicated to supporting others in their quest to achieve long-term recovery, and she's the founder and executive director of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center in New York City. She's a dynamic speaker, an educator, and publisher, and Melainie is the co-founder and first president of the International Association of Eating Disorders Professionals in the New York chapter. And she currently sits on the advisory board with the Center for the Study of Anorexia and Bulimia. She recently launched and published Redefining Wellness, the ultimate diet-free guide, a free ebook that contains contributions from 150 eating disorder and mental health experts that you can find for free at redefiningwellness.co. I really think you'll enjoy this episode, and you can make it to the end because she gets into so many of the things that we are all experiencing during these stressful times, and you might find answers that surprise you, like forgiving yourself. Here we go. Hey, Melainie, is that how you say your name? It's a really unique spelling. I love it. Melainie Rogers, thank you so much for being here on the show.
It's a pleasure, Marisa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is such an important topic because many of us deal with it on a regular basis, especially during times of stress. And for our listeners, they should know it's June 2nd, 2020 at the time of this recording. So there's so much going on in the world that is very heavy. And here in the United States, it's just causing so much unrest among our fellow humans and within ourselves. So I'd love for you to help us understand how that affects our eating habits today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah, there's a lot going on, as you said, and we're seeing people's relationship with food and eating is just really kicking up. So a lot to talk about there.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you have a little bit of a story to share with us about how you got into this, because I understand you have a registered dietitian background and you got your master's in nutrition, and you founded your own center to help people with eating disorders, and that's called Balanced, right? The Balanced Eating Disorder Treatment Center.
That's right, Marisa. Yeah, I founded that about 11 years ago. I'm in New York City, but believe it or not, 11 years ago, there was only one outpatient treatment center in New York. And at the time, New York State said, that's all we need. 10% of the population will struggle with an eating disorder at some point in time. So, that's very under-resourced. So really out of clinical necessity, I just decided that, someone needed to do something. So I opened Balance, And thank goodness we're still alive and kicking 11 years later, in spite of all the bureaucracy and regulations and all the stuff that is thrown at you as a business owner, and particularly a healthcare business owner. And then COVID-19 hit us. So now we're completely virtual. Thank goodness we were able to pivot and offer all of our services virtually. I think what's relevant to our conversation today is just that we're seeing an absolute spike in calls and inquiries from people who are just unraveling right now, understandably.
Absolutely. I think anyone who struggled with poor relationship with food or a mental disorder or anything really in their history, it's just so understandable for it to be resurfacing at this time. I don't know, it just makes a lot of sense to me. So what brought you to becoming a registered dietitian or getting so interested in nutrition and food in general?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes a long way back. I think when I was 10, actually, when I look back on it, my grandmother at the time had a really serious heart attack and ended up in the ICU. And I remember at that time, I was only 10. It was the first time to be at risk of losing someone close to me. And it had a really strong impression on me. And my grandmother really struggled with her weight. And after that heart attack, I remember there being a lot of talk and a lot of focus in her family, her immediate family, between herself and my grandfather, but also that trickled down into my family. And so I remember growing up, and all of my teen years was influenced by this idea of heart health and, food that promoted heart health, and that we had this genetic risk to heart disease. And so I decided then and there that I wanted to do something to prevent people from having heart attacks. You're 10, you have these very pie in the sky ideas. And so, being 10, I thought, okay, so that means I have to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. And then when I got a little older and realized that doctors don't do prevention. Doctors, unfortunately, end up kind of trying to take care of the damage after the disease has taken effect. So I was searching for something that was more preventative, and I was introduced to this career called a registered dietitian. I'd never heard of it before, but then I set my goal on that and decided that's what I wanted to do. Little did I know then that no one pays for prevention, even if you are a registered dietitian. However, we know the concepts, and we can certainly, do more now with social media actually to help with prevention. But anyway, that was how I got to really be interested in becoming a registered dietitian and going down that route. And I just thought I would focus on cardiovascular health, or as I got into running and actually had my own eating disorder in my 20s, that wasn't what propelled me to pursue eating disorders, funnily enough, because I was in complete denial that I had my own illness at the time. But I did, because of all the crazy running and obsessive exercising and such, I decided to pursue sports nutrition, which I think is pretty common. And then once I came to the States to pursue my master's in nutrition, I'm originally from Australia, I decided I wanted to come here to do my master's because I wanted to be close to the research. Australia is a great country. It's a large country, but a small population. And America has more going on with money for research. And there's an obesity research center right here in New York City. So I wanted to be right smack bang in the heart of it. So I came here and ended up interning at the Obesity Research Center and then working there for a couple of years because I thought, as a registered dietitian, with the obesity epidemic being such a huge part of the public health awareness campaign, this is 20 years ago now, Marisa, I thought, that's really where I should invest my time and energy, because there's a lot of work that will need to be done there. But it was while I was at the Obesity Research Center that I was introduced to binge eating disorder. And what was so fascinating is that there was a treatment going on where they had registered dietitians, but also therapists, psychiatrists, MDs, and a sports physiologist working with clients with binge eating disorder. Now, again, this is 20 years ago. This is before we even had a diagnostic code for binge eating disorder. We only got that code in 2013. And I was just so blown away by this idea of the psychology of eating, why we eat. What else is going on with behavior? Because most people who are struggling with their weight know that it would be better if they didn't overindulge on this or didn't overindulge on that. But their behaviors were different to what they cognitively might be thinking. And so that kind of gap there really compelled me or made me very curious. And so the psychology of eating became a real interest. And hence that's what really caught my attention. And I found that eating disorder is not just binge eating, but as I started to investigate more, we see eating disorders across the spectrum with bulimia, anorexia, and probably even more importantly, in the way that it's more prolific, is disordered eating, or just people not having a neutral relationship with food. And that's the vast majority of the population, actually, Marisa, which is why I'm impressed with, the work that you're doing and the messaging that you're trying to get out there is not around dieting per se, but around your relationship with food.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you explain more about disordered eating, because I'm sure that many of us can relate once we hear a little more from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So disordered eating is really a type of eating style, or if I cut it down to its basics, I would say it's more about your relationship with food. So what I mean by that is that for the so-called average person who doesn't have disordered eating, they get up in the morning, they say, oh, I'm hungry, let me have some breakfast, I have my oatmeal, I have my whatever, I'm full, I'm done. And then I don't think about food again. And then I get hungry, I grab a snack, and then I'm good, and then I get hungry again, it's lunch, etc. Rinse and repeat. For someone with disordered eating, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of decisions around, should I have this? But is that healthy? Is this the healthiest version? I'm doing almond milk, but should I be doing soy milk? Or should I be doing regular milk? I know I shouldn't be doing dairy. There's just a lot more noise. There's a lot more rules. There are a lot more feelings around the food with respect to good and bad, and also a lot more judgment of yourself when you do eat certain foods or not eat other foods. So really that's kind of the litmus test of whether or not you have a really neutral, pretty simple relationship with food. I don't know if our relationship with food is ever simple, actually, but, more plain vanilla. And then when it starts to get more complicated and more perhaps more overthinking, certainly, as I said, about judgment, and then that judgment comes back onto judgment of self. I'm bad because I ate the Doritos. And then if you take that on a spectrum, when it gets more and more obsessive and more restrictive, or more and more restrictive followed by binging, then it kind of takes you into the category of a full-blown eating disorder. But they're actually all kind of interrelated.
Wow. Yeah, I feel silly admitting this, but I attract a lot of clients who are looking to break disordered eating habits, but they didn't even know, and I didn't even know that's what it was called. It's like I teach people how to forget the rules and end dieting and have a better relationship with food so that they can live more freely and really enjoy what it's like to be a healthy, vital, like fun human being who loves food. I mean,
right.
I went through it myself. That's why I've gotten to this point. I used to be obsessed with all the rules.
Yes.
I mean, we all kind of do when we go through a nutrition type of path. The education can do that to you alone.
It can, actually. It really can. Yeah, like doctors, when doctors go through their training, there's a phenomenon whereby they think they have every disease that they study. It's a real phenomenon. And I think as nutritionists, we're also susceptible to the same thing. And also I think we, people are attracted to their fields of study for certain reasons. And I think as nutritionists, we're attracted to the idea of health and prevention of disease. And I think there's a lot of really great motivators that bring us to the field. And I would also say there is a gender piece here, but less and less so. Women in particular have been under a lot of pressure from society with the thin ideal. And so therefore, I think for a lot of us from our teen years, as our bodies changed, we started to look at food and started to, categorize food as good and bad because society was telling us so. So it is actually really hard to be neutral with food. It requires, in the current society we're in, requires a conscious decision to be neutral and to let go of a lot of those rules that we have consciously or unconsciously picked up along the way, not realizing that you don't have to live that way.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I don't think I would have realized it if I didn't have a partner who's like the opposite. And he was like, you need to relax, like constantly reminding me, I don't want to go out to eat with you anymore if you're going to be this way. And I was like, what happened to me? I used to be a foodie. Like, give me anything, I'll eat it. Like I was losing a part of my identity in that. And now I figured out I can do both. And the balance is coming more naturally to me, to be honest.
That's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, it is amazing. It's very freeing.
Yeah.
When you drop all the rules and such. But also what we're doing is we're just going back to the most basic, innate internal regulatory system, which is hunger, fullness, satiety. It's called intuitive eating. That's the word that, or the descriptor that many people may have heard, intuitive eating. But really it's what we're born with, hunger, fullness, satiety. Your body's own ability to control, or at least to signal how much food the body needs to keep your weight within a range that the genetics of your being is how you're programmed to be. It's the same as like we're kind of, it's in our genetics how tall we are. It's in our genetics what color hair we have and our eye color. It's in our genetics our weight range. And the messaging around that, there's $74 billion a year that's spent on the health and wellness and diet industry that tells you that, no, you can control your weight. And that's where people get really messed up, because we start manipulating our food and we externalize it. By that, I mean we start weighing our food or counting calories instead of relying on that internal regulatory system, which is so sophisticated. And that's where, there's so much more thinking that goes on that then leads us kind of down a rabbit hole of obsessiveness, which you touched upon there, Marisa.
Mm-hmm. I mean, aren't there so many other things affecting our ability to eat intuitively? Like, aren't there food manufacturers designing things to be specifically addictive, or the, accessibility we have to addictive foods? The way that we handle our stress and, translate that into our eating habits. Aren't all of these factors making it so hard to just listen to our hunger and fullness signals?
Absolutely, 110%. And that's where the education needs to be. Yes, you're absolutely right. If the food manufacturers spend millions of dollars a year on research to make foods that override our natural satiety signals, so you keep eating, which is, should be a law against it, right? I mean, I just find that just unethical on so many levels. And as you said, stress will mess up that sophisticated system. Dieting will definitely mess it up. Not listening to your hunger and fullness cues, busy schedules where you're just so busy that you just can't get to your food on time. So it's a sophisticated system, but there's a lot in our modern society that will mess with it. Also, just the pure excessive availability of food means that the average person will eat about 30% more than they would otherwise. So there are a lot of environmental factors that put pressure on that system for sure. And again, as I mentioned, that's where the education needs to be, right, around those vulnerabilities, as opposed to, coming up with a new diet plan, which we know doesn't work. 95% of diets fail, and then set people up for yo-yo dieting, which is more detrimental to your health than being a couple of pounds, at a higher weight than you maybe you desire to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that listening to our signals gets so confusing when you literally will have a voice in your head telling you, you deserve that. You should have that. It'll make you feel better. And that brings us to this conversation of binging or excessively snacking or making a bajillion exceptions about what you should eat because you're sad, you're lonely, you're stressed, you're in quarantine, or you're watching our country divide and crumble right before your eyes. And so many of us comfort ourselves with foods we had from our childhood, with baking. And with baking usually comes leftover cookies and brownies for the rest of the week, or 3 batches, because that's all we know what to do with our time and to comfort ourselves. So please bring us some of your guidance in the territory of stress snacking, emotional eating, things like that.
Absolutely. I think, honestly, it's a normal part of normal eating is some stress snacking. So I want to just to help people give themselves a break at this time, Marisa, because the more we get stressed about the stress eating, the worse the stress eating is. And I think it's because we have this idea that no emotional eating is okay, when in fact we all comfort eat at some point for some reason. And if ever there was a reason, this would be it.
I love this lady. This is great. I totally love what you are saying.
Right.
Now.
Isn't that real life though, right?
Yeah,
and give ourselves a break, because again, the more we beat ourselves up, the more we have a stress response physiologically in the body, which means the more we're going to turn to those foods to comfort ourselves. And then we start to feel really bad about ourselves because we start to feel out of control. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to bake some cookies and I'm going to enjoy those cookies over the course of the next week. And I might have 2 or 3 cookies a day, and that's okay. But what you're not doing is sitting down and eating a whole bunch, because that would be binge eating. And you know what? Look, if that's happening right now because of the stress, that's okay. That's just data for you to know that, my goodness, I am really needing some extra support at this time. Again, beating ourselves up is not going to help. Also, there's a lot of people out there we've seen in the substance abuse world, wine and alcohol sales have gone up 300% and 400%. And somehow as a society, we might say, oh, that's not so good, but we might laugh about it. But when it comes to food, we're more judgmental about overconsumption. So I would say bake those cookies, have that comfort food, be mindful when you're eating it. And no, maybe just acknowledging to yourself, I'm really stressed right now, and that's why I'm probably eating more than I am. And this is a really stressful time. And try to be gentle with yourself, but also know that if you're eating, a batch of cookies every single day, and that's probably causing you a lot of distress, also know that there are people out there such as myself where you can just reach out and say, hey, this is feeling really out of control and it's making me feel really bad about myself. Can I check in about some kind of support? And there's actually a lot of free resources right now, Marisa, where the eating disorder world, my world, have really, they've got, meal supports, and we're running 2 free support groups 4 times a month to try to give more support to people during this really difficult time as they find their relationship with food is really kicking up and causing a lot of distress.
I'd like to ask you if you're aware of this, but I believe I'd be speaking for others if I say I think some people might resist or avoid seeking out help from an eating disorder center in fear that they are going to be diagnosed with an eating disorder. So I guess expressing to you, are you aware that some people might want to come just talk about their, stress eating and emotional eating without leaving thinking they have some type of diagnosis or, major statement about, their disordered eating patterns?
Absolutely, which is why we started Redefining Wellness, and we have a free downloadable book where we've got over 150 contributions from people across the whole health, wellness, disordered eating, anti-diet spectrum. And that's really our response to the diet culture that's out there, but also it, I think, is more identifiable to more people who might be stress eating and they don't have an eating disorder, and it does feel really intimidating or not not applicable to them to reach out to an eating disorder center. So redefining wellness is really about your relationship with food, and if you're emotional eating and you need a bit more support, then that's where I would definitely direct you to.
Well, thank you for that, and that's great advice. And just hearing you explain what is in the book and understanding where I was coming from, it reminded me of the quiz that you have on your website that says, do you have an eating disorder? And you can check boxes next to these symptoms if they relate to you. And it's like, if you have one or more, you may possibly, have an eating disorder. It's hard to say. But I look at this list and it's like, people might be checking off 5 or 10 of them and still feel like, doesn't everybody do that? So let's just talk about a couple of them, like feeling need to compensate after meals through restricting or exercising. Purging is also on there, which I understand is an eating disorder. But most of us don't think that thinking of compensating after a meal with exercise or restriction is disordered eating. And another one here is to have gastrointestinal distress, to exercise to lose weight, even if you are sick or have an injury. If you constantly think about food or your weight or your body, it's like, check, 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 like I really am not in this place right now, but I know I have been, and I know lots of people that I love and help would check all these boxes. So what do you have to say about that in regards to having a title like disordered eating?
Yeah, I don't like titles because I think, to your point earlier, Marisa, they put people off. And also, I think what's important to remember is myself, when I had my own eating disorder, I didn't, if you asked me then, I did not have an eating disorder. I was just healthy. And honestly, when people gave me a hard time because they did, I was just, in my mind, I was like, oh, you're just jealous. You're just jealous that I get up at 5 o'clock and run 2 hours, and I run in the snow, and I run when I have the flu, and you just don't have my willpower. And I look back now and I'm like, I'm so embarrassed. I mean, I'm embarrassed, but that's the illness, right? Yeah. And part of the illness and part of what happens with the brain when we are under eating or we're eating in a disordered way is that there's a lot of denial and ambivalence. And so that's actually a really big factor why people perhaps are reluctant to reach out. And also what I want to say, Marisa, is in our current society, it's so normalized. Like, as you said, like, a lot of friends and family that would check every box or most boxes on that list. And also ask the question, but doesn't everyone do this? Which is a reflection of how prevalent disordered eating is and how much people are walking around distressed about their body and their food and spending way too much time and energy on it when we could be doing other brilliant things like what you're doing with your coaching and, your podcasts, and putting our energy towards our families and these other wonderful things, So there's a great phrase, it's called normative discontent. And I think that captures this idea that we don't even actually realize that there's so much discontentment within us because it's so normalized. We think that just everyone stresses about their weight and their calories and their food choices. And so we just think that that's life, but in fact it's not.
Yeah. And I'm imagining what it's like for someone who really is dangerously overweight. Their doctor keeps telling them they can't keep living like this because it's causing them pain and it's causing them to have dangerous biomarkers beyond medications. And these same people are trying to have a better relationship with food and be more loving of their body and their diet. But at the same time, they're like, hey, I need to lose weight. Like, I'm fat. I feel terrible. I feel terrible about myself. My doctor's telling me, my kids are telling me. So how do you have this relationship with acceptance when you need to change?
Sure, absolutely. And they're not mutually exclusive. And so there's a movement now that's become more and more mainstream, I guess, that people are more aware of, which is called health at every size. And the philosophy behind it is really that no matter what weight you are at, we can all do things to be a healthier version of ourselves, no matter our weight. And so what I would like to say is I think that philosophically that rings true. And also I would like to also say that weight is not the only way that we measure our health. Certainly it's a factor, but it's only one factor. And so what I want to say there is we can all do things to make sure, are we getting enough fruits and vegetables which help not only just our digestive system, but our microbiome, our prebiotics, our probiotics, our gut bacteria, our mood, which is then affected by that, and just basic nutrients. So we're getting our basic nutrients, which also affect mood. And are we getting some, joyful movement in our day each day? And are we sleeping enough? Your 5 principles that I saw on your website, Marisa, I think capture this just so beautifully, that health is not just a number on a scale. When it comes to mobility, I'm not minimizing that for our higher weight clients. If they find themselves in a higher weight body, there are some real logistical challenges for them. Most of my clients that are in a higher weight body have dieted all their life, and their higher weight is usually a product of yo-yo dieting, often binge eating disorder or disordered eating, and sometimes, yes, medical underlying concerns as well. And you put all that together, and it's just a trifecta for being at a higher weight. So the answer, therefore, isn't go on another diet, because that'll only put you at risk for weight loss, weight regain, plus some, and actually worsen your health condition. So the goal is to move towards more intuitive eating, awareness around your eating, awareness around when you might emotionally overeat or binge, as well as looking at mood and emotions. And as I mentioned, joyful movement, sleep patterns, relationships, having a voice, not feeling like you're a doormat, all of those sorts of factors that will affect your overall health and mental health as well.
Definitely. I'm also wondering now, for the people who have expressed to me that they are aware of their stress eating at this time, and they are practicing acceptance so that they don't carry guilt surrounding that, extra bag of chips or the batch of cookies they made 3 times this week. But they also don't want to regret it. When all this is over, they're going to be like, I lost progress on all the things I was doing for my health. I lost progress on the weight loss I was really finally achieving. And now I feel just discouraged, like I'm never going to be able to get there again.
Absolutely. This is a little bit of a cognitive piece, because I think what a lot of us really struggle with is black and white thinking and a little bit of catastrophic thinking. So my answer to this is more based upon cognitive thinking, how we think about things and how we frame things. The reality is what we're going through right now really sucks. And it is 110% okay to do the best you can do right now to keep yourself safe and to keep yourself sane. That's they're my leading principles right now. And the other leading principle, the other 3 S's I've been calling it, is to stay sober, whatever that means for you. So what I mean by sober is whatever behaviors when you're under high stress you might default to that make you feel really bad about yourself, and trying to be really kind and compassionate and minimize those as much as you can. And so I would say that for right now, all bets are off. And I think we have to see, I'm not saying therefore just go crazy because you won't feel good about yourself. But what I'm saying is that I think these are unprecedented times, and it is appropriate for your mental health right now to take the pressure off. So I think it's appropriate to put some things on pause, other things just do what you can do. Maybe you can go for a walk around the block, but you're not able to do your run or whatever it might be. Maybe find, like a minimum thing that you can do each day that still makes you feel a little bit okay. And then just know that when this is over, I'm going to recommit myself to this and be planning towards that. The tricky part is because we as a society tend to be so black and white or all or nothing. There is that fear that if I lose momentum, that's it, I'm a goner. And I would say that's a really, really important time, therefore, to reach out for some extra support, because this is where you need some extra support to kind of get back to where you were.
Oh, for sure.
But I think you're setting yourself up for misery if if you try to put yourself in a cocoon and ignore all the stresses that we're going through and expect yourself to still perform at the level that you were. I don't know about you, Marisa, but as a professional and also as a mother, I just made a decision probably after about 4 weeks. The first 4 weeks were hellish. And when I realized that it wasn't going to change anytime soon, I realized it was just not sustainable the way that I was trying to run my business and do homeschooling and do everything else. And so I just made a conscious decision that because I was starting to feel so frazzled and so overwhelmed, I can't be the best parent I want to be when I'm in that place. And also selfishly, it's miserable to be walking around each day feeling that amount of pressure. So I made a decision that I'm not going to concern myself with X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. It'll wait, and it can wait. My relationship with my daughter is far more important. The health of my business, where people rely on me to keep them employed and also to take care of our clients, it's very important. I need to take care of myself so I can show up for my business and my daughter. And then I just was like, I'm not going to be thinking about writing the next bestseller book, mm-hmm. or bless you because you've got a podcast, but I'm not going to be thinking about this is the time to start the podcast or to mm-hmm. be putting out more content. I mean, we've been trying to do some of that, mm-hmm. But I just had to back away from the pressure I was putting on myself because if I didn't, I knew I was in trouble.
I have been going through the exact same thing.
Right. Right.
Well, thank you for giving everyone that type of permission and for helping us to see that you really can relate. And I know that, or I imagine that being in your position as someone who really specializes in helping others with disordered eating, you wouldn't want to specify any foods as being good or bad. But I am curious what your opinion is on how sugar and maybe like highly processed foods or toxic seed oils, how really excessive intake of those, because they're usually the foods we turn to in stress eating. We turn to processed foods or high sugar foods and high fat foods. I just wanted to know if you have an opinion about how that affects our stress and our emotions.
Yeah.
Having that type of diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two aspects to it. First and foremost, when we're under stress, we reach for sugar and carbohydrates, and there's a biochemical reason. Because when we consume sugar and carbohydrates, and not steamed or sauteed chicken, by the way, there's a reason, because it actually affects our serotonin levels in our brain and our dopamine response. And all that means, guys, is that it makes us feel better on a chemical level. And when we're stressed, if you think about it from a protective mechanism, you're trying to make yourself feel better. You're trying to make yourself feel less out of sorts, less stressed, and you reach for carbohydrates and sugar, etc. I do the same. But just knowing that that's the reason why you're doing that, you're making yourself feel better. And I applaud that desire to make yourself feel better. But it is a short-term fix. And so what I encourage is that while you're reaching for the sugar, because you still want to go to reach for the sugar, and the raw carrots are just not going to cut it. And that's going to take so much willpower, which I don't really believe in willpower in the sense of, that there's just not going to cut it, and it's unrealistic, and it's also ridiculous. I don't want carrots when I'm stressed. I want my Doritos, goddammit. So what I would say is be mindful, though, that when you do have the carbs, etc., they're great in the moment, but they're going to cause you to spike and crash, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. But just know that it's going to then make you want more of them and then more of them. And then you might start feeling really bad about your food choices. So what I would say is have them. Know that in an hour or so, you're going to do a deep dive into, you're going to crash, and maybe have a more balanced meals, or maybe it's time for dinner and have some protein with some carbs and some vegetables to help fill you up, but also give you the essential nutrients. Because this is a time when, because we're so stressed, the body's just chewing through our nutrients and our vitamins. And we actually really need those, and those are primarily found in fruit and vegetables. It's not very sexy, but the whole eat your fruits and vegetables, it's not about weight loss or weight management, actually, from my perspective. It's really just about what does your body need and what is going to make it feel better tomorrow versus how you feel right now. And you might feel crappy right now. So I guess I want to legalize, the reaching for carbohydrates, knowing why, because we're trying to self-soothe, which I applaud that, but then set yourself up for, or while you're having your carbs, add some protein, because then you won't spike and crash. You'll gently roll, and you won't be set up for then more and more and more sugar. It'll help to decrease the sugar cravings if you add protein.
So if somebody really wants to make that change and they become so aware of their emotional eating or stress eating, do you have any strategies, or do you help people find replacement habits for that? So instead, in the moment when they want to reach for it, they become aware and they say, instead, I will do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a process, and really what it is bringing more awareness to your relationship with food. So by that, I mean that if you find yourself every hour getting up and going to the fridge, which a lot of my clients have been reporting, then just gently check in with yourself and ask the question, am I hungry? And if the answer is no, but I'm still looking in the fridge, that's perfectly a normal behavior, because actually there's an acronym. It's HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and I would also add bored. Right. And so we're looking for just something, some kind of sensation, right? And food provides that. And we've done that. We've done that as a human species. We've done that for centuries. So there's nothing new there. But what I encourage people to do is be a bit curious about their behavior. And if you're noting that every hour I'm going, but I'm not hungry. Okay, so I'm not hungry. All right, so maybe I should, I don't know, go and paint my nails, or maybe I should take a bath, or maybe I should call someone, or let me do something that I really love to do and I don't give myself time to do. I'm going to sit down with my favorite magazine, which for me is People. I love reading People magazine. It's like this trashy kind
guilty
of
pleasure.
Like, guilty pleasure. What's my guilty pleasure? I'm going to go and do that, have a drink of water, and then let me see in an hour if I'm hungry, and then I'll go back and grab a snack. But that takes some time to bring that kind of level of awareness. And sometimes I'll encourage people, when it's so automatic, is to keep a little notepad or something, some reminder in the kitchen. Again, there's no judgment here. And then each time you go in the kitchen, just check in. Am I hungry or full? Maybe have H or F, full, or bored, or something, and then just look and check and go, what am I? I think I'm bored. Okay, God damn it, and circle bored, and then try and go back out of the kitchen. Or you might say, I'm bored and I'm going to have half a cookie or a full cookie anyway. Okay, that's fine. Let's just to be aware of it. And as you bring more and more awareness to your eating patterns and your relationship with food, you can then start to separate out a little bit from using food to moderate all emotions. And it becomes less and less over time. That's the goal. And again, that's not going to happen overnight. But again, the idea of mindfulness is a word that, is used a lot now. But that's really what it is.
Yeah. I was thinking, in mindfulness, meditation, education, and practice, they often talk about one of the benefits being that you catch yourself like with bad habits or attracted to something to get away from something else. So it's like, we don't want to sit with this uncertainty. We don't want to sit with this boredom. We don't want to do this boring task for work. We don't want to do X, Y, Z, or face this emotion or whatever we're doing. So it's like an avoidance habit. It's like, just to avoid the state that I am in right now, or the feeling that I am having right now, I am eating. I go to the fridge. I did it this morning. I went to the fridge. And I didn't even know what the heck I was doing there. Yep. I didn't even know what I was doing there. I don't even eat before a certain time. Like, I'm a fasting coach. Like, I totally have a relaxed approach to fasting. There's no certain time I can eat or not eat. This is just a way of life for me. And I was looking in the fridge and I was like, ugh, that doesn't even look good. And then I thought to myself, like, oh my God, like I was like about to grab something to eat just because I didn't want to feel depressed right now, because I didn't want to feel sad.
That's right. That's exactly right. And again, remember, absolutely. And we do that so often. And I would say most people do that. Most of us, all of us are vulnerable to that. And it's bringing a little bit more awareness to it. And then also, as I said earlier, to be gentle with ourselves as well, because we're feeling so out of sorts right now. And also the normal things that we might do to distract ourselves from uncomfortable feelings or our normal coping mechanisms may not be available to us right now.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, there's an even greater reliance on food as well. So there's a double whammy hit. And it's really
point.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's a really, really tough time. So again, I just encourage people to be just really gentle with themselves. This is not normal. And hopefully things will start to reopen and we can get back to using our normal distractions, all the things that help us to regain our footing and feel more grounded when we are feeling kicked off, kind of shaken off our core. And hopefully, the food piece for those where this is a temporary uptick in reliance on food, it will normalize back to where it was after things open back up.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of people becoming more and more aware of these habits being at home. I think we've had enough time to kind of see the ups and downs of this whole experience within ourselves and to notice some patterns. And we're getting up on about time here. So if there's anything else you'd like to leave us with, we didn't really talk about binge eating, which I know is a very important topic. Are there any early signs there that you'd like to make our listeners aware of in case they are experiencing binge eating?
Sure. Binge eating usually is the product of a lot of restriction. So if you're finding yourself skipping meals and eating really, really low, small amounts of food, thinking that you'll try to prevent weight gain or this is a great time to diet, and then you're feeling out of control and you're eating a lot of large amount of food in a short period of time, feeling very distressed about it, that's a hallmark of binge eating. And just know that restriction sets you up. Obviously, emotions are a part of it, but there's two types of binges. There's physiological binge from restriction, and then there's an emotional binge that's not related to hunger and fullness. It's really just, I had a fight with someone, I'm going to the fridge, I'm going to go into a food coma.
Okay.
Physiological binges, you have some control over that, because if you're restricting, you're setting yourself up. So I would encourage people to, as best they can, try to eat consistently throughout the day. Try not to restrict or undereat, because unfortunately you'll end up in exacerbating that binge behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And I'm constantly having to navigate these waters with people who are interested in fasting. And I will straight up tell them, I really don't think that's the lifestyle for you at this time. It really has to be something intuitive and come naturally and come with ease. And with that, I think it comes a lot of, inner work and just awareness. And it sounds like that's what you help a lot of people do, is just become more aware and accepting. So thanks for being here. Balanced TX, that's balanced, BALANCEDTX.com is your website, correct?
Absolutely. That's it, Marisa. Yep. And just for the viewers, they can give us a call for a free 20-minute discovery call. If you're concerned about a loved one or maybe your own relationship with food. And then, of course, go to redefiningwellness.co to be able to download our free Redefining Wellness book.
Yes, you call that the Ultimate Diet Free Guide.
That's it.
And you said the proceeds do go to Project Heal for eating disorders if they choose to find it on Amazon. So that's Redefining Wellness. All of the links will be in the show notes, so you can get in touch with Melainie and use her amazing resources. Thanks, Melainie.
Thanks so much, Marisa.
You're
Loved
welcome.
it. Bye for now.
All right, that about does it. Thanks for sticking through to the end. And remember, Melainie offers everyone a free 20-minute discovery call. And as you can see, she's really easygoing, compassionate person. I would definitely take her up on that. Go to balancedtx.com. All of that will be in the show notes. And you can always find the show notes at tinyurl.com/FOW home. And please share our show with someone else, because that's why I'm making the podcast. I want to get the word out that
dieting and health and wellness doesn't have to be so overwhelming, and there's plenty of resources out there to help you make sense of it all so that you can find the life that really works best for you and your loved ones. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.